Welcome to Front 3, the show where I recap 3 games, 3 stories, 3 stars, and 3 stooges from the Premier League game week. The first game I want to talk about is Brighton versus Everton. There were already a lot of storylines heading into the game. We had James Milner's 23rd season, Karu Mitoma back in the fold, and several high-profile debutants, including Fabian Hürzeler as the youngest Premier League manager ever. The game got off to a great start. In the first half hour or so, the teams were open, direct, and created lots of chances, including some venomous long-range efforts. Some of these were sparked by careless giveaways at the back, which is always going to happen in a young season. This period culminated with Minta and Mitoma linking up for an absolutely classic goal. After a quick transition, Minta beat his man and whipped the ball between the defender and the keeper for an easy finish at the back post. From that point on, Brighton really put Everton to the sword. Welbeck had a few great chances dribbling right up the middle, taking one of them early in the second half. A huge takeaway from the game was that Everton's midfielders were really careless. Gay and Iroegbunam gave away possession on multiple occasions. Ashley Young was also struggling with Mitoma on the left, and inevitably got sent off after a bad touch and taking him down when clear on goal. You really can't have a 39-year-old guarding one of the most dynamic wingers in the Premier League. Substitute Adingra put the cherry on top after a great entry pass from Danny Welbeck, who had a great game. Overall, it was the type of game we really want to see on match week 1, ending 3-0 to Brighton. I think I could have been a little too high on Everton entering the season. The second game I want to talk about is Newcastle vs Southampton. Looking at the lineups, there were a lot of familiar faces. For Newcastle, I was excited to see Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento at fullback. For Southampton, Sagawara and Brereton Diaz were newcomers making the start. Despite being a 1-0, game state made this fixture really interesting. After a cagey first half hour, the aforementioned Brereton Diaz slammed into Fabian Schär's back, prompting a pretty minor retaliation that got the Swiss centre-back sent off. This was just one of some pretty poor refereeing decisions over the weekend, which is sure to be another storyline this season. Now playing 11 on 10, Southampton controlled the rest of the game, but Gavin Bazunu gifted possession in his own box, which Joe Linton capitalized upon for the game's lone goal. His finish was actually Newcastle's only shot on target, and despite having 78% possession throughout the match, Southampton were pretty blunt up front, only mustering 4 shots on target. This is a familiar story for Southampton from 2 years ago, and one that I predicted might happen in my predictions video just a few days ago. They really need someone to step up and score the goals. Outside of a goal line clearance from Lewis Hall and a few tame headers, Southampton just didn't come close to taking advantage of the man advantage, collecting 0 points in a crucial moment for survival early in the season. If I'm a Southampton fan, I'm raging at this result. For Newcastle, it's kind of a lost game, but to get 3 points is really impressive. The final game I want to highlight from the weekend was Brentford and Crystal Palace. Ivan Toney was left out of the squad due to transfer news, and it sounds like it was a team, not player decision. Crystal Palace, on the other hand, had pretty much a full arsenal of weapons, despite transfer links for some of their top talent. It was an interesting game between two teams coming off opposite ends of last season. Palace ended on a high, with Brentford wondering about their future. The first big action was Eberechi Eze scoring from a crazy angle on a free kick that was ruled out for a foul in the box that was completely inane. This was our second big refereeing decision of the weekend. Again, I think it was the incorrect call and should have been looked at through VAR, if not for a hasty whistle that made it impossible to review. It just went to show how talented Eberechi Eze is, though. But then Brentford struck on the counter, proving that they have plenty of Premier League quality attacking talent. Vissa and Mbeumo linked up for the opener, with Vissa making a great decoy run for Mbeumo to cut in on his lethal left foot. Although he may have been unsighted, I also thought it was a bit weak from Dean Henderson in goal. Brentford also followed that up with a couple of other good moments on the break, but it was really Palace that came back into their own. Fullback Daniel Munoz had a very scrappy header to force an own goal off the slow Ethan Pinnock after a period of possession for Palace. Odsonne Edouard almost made it 2 with an offside goal, which again showed Eze's threat off the left. As many games end, though, it was a goal out of little for Brentford, with a deflected finish that fell into Vissa's path for a tap-in. It was a very compelling Premier League fixture, and I'd fully recommend going back and watching the highlights. A shout out to Daichi Kamada, who had some good moments in his debut as well. Now on to 3 big stories of the weekend. The first, Man United's wingers. They started the game with Amad Diallo and Marcus Rashford on the right and left respectively, which I thought was an interesting move. Both of them looked pretty ineffective, especially Rashford, who really needed to prove his intensity after a poor last season and being left out of the England squad. Garnacho came on late in the match and missed an open goal, and Sancho was nowhere to be seen, leading me to wonder what United's winger situation is going to look like going forward. With Xerxes scoring off the bench, United may have some attacking threat with Xerxes and Højlund rotating, but if they don't have support from their wingers, it's going to be a long season. Storyline number 2 is the quality of goalkeeping that I noticed throughout the league this weekend. I watched a number of goalies make important mistakes that almost or did lead to goals. Leno, Raya, Henderson, and Bazunu gave the ball away dangerously in build-up, with only the Southampton keeper unfortunate enough to see his side concede from his mistake, and the game's only goal at that. Jose Sa spilled a tame shot and let Saka score at his near post. Similarly, Neto spilled a shot right into the path of Chris Wood, which ended up in Forest's only goal, and made an uncomfortable-looking foot save later in the game. Areola should have come for Amadou Onana's header just a few inches from his goal mouth, and let Leon Bailey round him when he came too far out of his box. Ederson had some scary moments with his judgment and catching, while Robert Sanchez let in Kovacic's shot that should have been a pretty comfortable save, and looked uncomfortable in build-up. To be fair, there were some great saves from the likes of Onana, Raya, and even Leno making up for their mistakes, but the quality of goalkeeping, and especially with the demands put on them to play out of the back, seems to have taken a hit, at least in week 1. The third storyline of the week is Chelsea's team news. We all know that they have 40-some-odd players in the squad, but it was really interesting to see who they fielded in the game week just gone. Robert Sanchez was at goalkeeper, and whether or not he keeps his spot probably is still up in the air after his performance. Ben Chilwell is out of the squad and apparently out of the plans, with a potential transfer being lined up. The same goes for Raheem Sterling, whose team released a pretty scathing statement after the match. Romeo Lavia also got the start after missing out on most of last season, while Kieran Dewsbury-Hall started on the bench. Fofana and Caldwell was not the center-back pairing I was expecting, but they looked alright together. Mykhailo Mudryk also remained glued to the bench in a game that really could have used someone's pace. It'll be really interesting to see how Enzo Maresca uses the squad going forward, and if any other players can assert themselves as starters or important bench pieces. Now on to my 3 stars of the weekend. This is not the best 3 players of the weekend, but 3 players I wanted to shout out as really impressing me. My third star is Trent Alexander-Arnold, whose amazing, incisive passing from the right created a lot of opportunities for Liverpool, including one that turned into a goal. I know a lot of people malign him for his defending, but he's such a creative player, and I think he's going to be really important under Arne Slot. My second star is Arsenal star boy Bukayo Saka. He looks so dangerous in a game that Arsenal weren't quite at their best, getting his goal and assist too. His link-up with Havertz was promising, both in and around the box. Speaking more about his goal and assist, his ball in for Havertz was pinpoint, and his goal was a signature finish. Most impressive, though, was how much the ball was on his feet, and how quick and decisive he seemed. I think it's going to be a huge season for Saka, who I tipped to win the Premier League's Player of the Season award. But my first star of the week is somewhat of a surprising one. I'm going with Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa. No, he didn't get on the score sheet, but he completely bossed the game, and was at the heart of everything good that Villa did. He's a really strong dribbler, but also graceful, with creative capabilities. He had a lot of super intelligent moments. One that comes to mind is a quick restart from a free kick to play Ollie Watkins through. He also had a quick layoff on the turn that led to a good chance. He could have also had a goal on the rebound from that very chance, but he was just a little off balance and didn't quite get enough on the shot. Perhaps the reason why I was so impressed was that Rogers somewhat feels like a new signing, even though he was there at the back half of last season. Playing in that inverted wide position or centrally, I think he's going to be a real threat for Aston Villa all year. Finally, here are my 3 fools of the weekend. My third fool is Dominic Calvert-Lewin for his flop that didn't win a penalty against Brighton. It was a pretty classic flop, and an embarrassing one when you see the lack of contact on the replay. My second fool is Mikel Antonio. In just the 4th minute of the game, he loses Amadou Onana on the corner for an easy header. Even though they were playing in a zone, I do think he let Onana drift in way too easily. Then what really sealed the deal for me was how he undercut the same player, Onana, when Onana was going up for a header. Just a dirty play, and not one that I want to see in the game. My first fool, though, has to be Wolves centre-back Yerson Mosquera. He had 2 incidents against Arsenal players that went unpunished, but they were downright weird, grabbing Gabriel Jesus by the butt and Kai Havertz by the neck. Wolves looked all over the place, and Mosquera's antics were just the tip of the iceberg. So that was the front 3. Leave a comment with any changes you'd like to see, and subscribe for a weekly episode throughout the Premier League season.